It's the 14th of January, 2022. Welcome to the 178th episode of Security Weekly News Wrap-Up Show for the week of 9 January. We got Remote Desktop, Apple, Microsoft, Taco Tuesday, Gootloader, and Farmville Gangsta Edition. I'm Doug White, and this is the Security Weekly News Wrap-Up Show.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week. Your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. Every 11 seconds, there's a new ransomware attack. Oil pipelines, universities, corporations, all paying millions of dollars. Barracuda says, don't pay the ransom. Before a ransomware attack occurs, train your teams to recognize an attack and use anti-phishing technology. Protect your applications, and they can't get onto your network. Simple backup and restore solutions quickly recover your data without paying the ransom. Build your ransomware protection plan now by visiting securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda.
All right, I'm Doug White. It's the first wrap-up show of 2022. We already did a news show, so here we go. On Application Security Weekly number 179, John and Mike had Christian Rio, who is Dill Dog at the Cult of Dead Cow. If you've never been involved with them, they're awfully cool. Been around a long time, and it was a fun segment. The segment in particular was about shifting left in DevOps and AppSec, and you know, we've heard a lot of talk about that over the last couple of years. And this particular segment was about what does it take to make shifting left actually effective instead of just being a buzzword. A lot of talk about how to build successful AppSec and so forth. So definitely a fun segment with Dill Dog. In the second segment, the FTC issues a warning about taking Log4j seriously. J&DI is elsewhere. Cache poisoning shows challenges in normalizing strings. There's a good college title. SIMGREP for refactoring configs with security in mind. The Q4 2021 ThinkScape Quarterly. Salesforce to require MFA, and more. On Business Security Weekly number 245, Ben, Jason, and Matt had Colby Dias, the director of product management at AppGate, on. The segment was about how security risk and complexity are problems for cloud resources, regardless of whether they're cloud native or traditionalist type architectures. Very, relevant and current set of topic. They talked about zero trust and using that to strengthen and simplify all the access controls and so forth. Users connecting to multi-cloud resources, secure service-to-service communications, and running security as code. So a lot of good stuff there. If you're doing cloud or you're thinking about doing cloud, it's definitely worth checking that one out. In the second segment, no Log4j at all. So you can imagine that. But they had 2021 recaps and lessons learned, 2022 New Year's resolutions, and predictions for 2022. I think they have another show on this week. On Enterprise Security Weekly 256, Adrian Cady and Tyler Shields had Chris Lahiri, the co-founder and CISO at Ignite, as a guest. That segment was about how to keep your security resolutions for 2022, which made me end up thinking about what I was going to talk about today as a threat. Enterprise security pitfalls and areas that you should focus on when you're planning your cybersecurity strategy for this year. They did go on and talk about data hygiene, ransomware prevention and recovery, challenges in a security distributed workforce, and the changing role of IT, along with data sprawl. So, again, a pretty meaty set of topics there. In the second segment, Derek Johnson, a senior reporter at SC Media, joined the show to talk about federal cybersecurity policy in 2021. There was a lot of changes to that in last year, and so you've been seeing a great deal of change in that space. Executive orders, new regs, partnerships between public and private sector, and new law enforcement strategies were all being used in 2021 to try and improve the federal security posture and how that they could better engage with the industry, something that nobody's ever done very well. There's, we've all been involved in trying to cross that boundary between law enforcement, federal law enforcement, local law enforcement, and the private sector, and it's a very big challenge. They went on and discussed what to expect from Congress in the United States in 2022. So a pretty exciting kind of good place to start there if you're starting to think about 2022. On Security Weekly News number 177, Jason talked about something I always find amusing, and they weren't cutting to me, but I kept laughing because of cyber attribution. Everybody wants cyber attribution. Politicians are calling and saying, I want these people arrested, I want them rounded up and whatever, the people that did this, the people that did that. But that's a really tough thing to do. And they were talking about how the EU has been criticized for a very fragmented and slow approach to trying to figure out who to blame for attacks. But it's easy to say that when you're like a politician and you come on, on the Senate panel and go, sir, are you now or have you ever been a hacker? And that's a tough one, because it's very difficult to attribute these things to a specific group. And Jason went on and talked about, are you really blaming the right people anyway? These nation states probably haven't figured out what they're going to do and maybe make it look like somebody else did it. And we all know that kind of, obfuscation is something that's very doable. And so it was a fun thing to hear Jason talk about. On Paul's Security Weekly number 723, first up was a tech segment with an exploration of the Log4j exploit step by step. So if you want to see how it works and you want to learn how to use it, well, here's a step-by-step guide for amusement purposes only. Great segment. You're definitely going to want to watch that one. The second segment was equally appealing to me. Dragos Ryu, the CEO at dragostech.com, was on. And Dragos basically organizes the CanSec WestCon, PackSec, Pwn to Own, and a lot of other fun things. So it's a great segment. If you did miss that one, you definitely want to go back and check it out. And of course, they switched to Wednesday night. So if you haven't updated your calendar, Paul's Security Weekly now appearing on Wednesday evenings. I had to update my calendar because I've had Thursday nights reserved for so long for that. And it was like, wow, it had changed everything. And of course, in the third segment, they had the news. My threat of the week is going to be complacency. I really got this from one of those earlier segments, and I started thinking about it and thinking about going forward in 2022 and questions people have asked me and stuff that I've been talking about with people. And, for what seems like about 100 years to me, I've been talking about the need for security and it started way back in that very first, and some of you heard me talk at cons and things about when I first tried to do a pen test way back in 1986 and, got the old boardroom pushback of we can't afford it or, we'll have to look into that in Q3 of 3 years from now or, nobody's going to ever figure this kind of thing out. And I start hearing those kind of things, all the time from C-suite type people who are saying, haven't we got this fixed yet? Why does this need to continue to grow? It seems like we ought to have this under control. And 2021, I think sent another wake-up call to a lot of people who saw these huge ransomware numbers. The story I attached was a report on how much growth there had been in cyber attacks just in 2021 over 2020. It wasn't even like an all-time. It was just between those 2 years. I mean, the story I attached, and this was even before Log4j came out, they were seeing massive spikes in attacks. They were up 40% before Log4j, up 40% over 2020. And after Log4j came out, well, they started breaking records with the number of attacks. And one of the weeks after Log4j was known, they were recording an average of 925 attacks per week on organizations that they were looking at. I mean, that's a lot. And I know all of us know this, and we see these attacks, just a constant stream of attacks on your systems or probes and so forth. And I don't know exactly how they were delineating what constituted an attack, but it seems all this starts to be the same old stuff, right? And I start to hear these things like, well, hey, we bought that brand new product that has next gen AI and machine learning algorithms that's going to prevent the old virtual ultraviolence from sneaking into the world again. Yeah, that ought to do it, right? We're done, correct? And there's still that attitude that all we really need is that one little thing, that one piece of software, that one appliance, and everything's going to be okay, and we can start cutting these security budgets. And it's the same approach that they take to selling all those gadgets and clubs and stuff that's supposed to make you play golf better. Never works, of course. Or that new diet thing is going to make me look like Jason Momoa if I just drink this cat pee infused seltzer water 4 times a day, and it didn't work at all. I mean, I didn't try it, but But anyway, for a long time, I think we've never blinked about financial. I don't actually have the data on when did financial audit actually start. When did the government say you need to control this stuff? We need to audit. We need to review controls. We need to have policies. I mean, you can get a college degree in this kind of stuff around financial, right? I mean, if you're a CPA or you're a finance major, you get a pretty serious about a bit of training on audit. Every significant organization in the world has internal audit, external audit, and all that's just dedicated to controlling the financial side and ensuring that no one's being ripped off or that they're ripping you off. And there's all these rules and regs and so forth that are followed, the whole industry around that. It's in the federal code. I mean, you have to do it. But as it is, we have to keep pushing and fighting to try to make security something that sits in the organization the same way that financial audit sits in the organization, that is something that has to be there, and it's the only way we're going to keep things copacetic, and we're not always going to succeed. That's the other thing that really drives me crazy is when they go, yeah, but we spent all this money and we still got attacked. And I'm like, yeah, you spent all this money on financial audit and you still sometimes get embezzled. I mean, and banks never think that they're going to take one little appliance with next-gen AI and it's going to stop people from robbing the banks. So they still have cameras and guards and silent alarms and those cool dye packs of glitter bombs and all that kind of stuff that they can sneak in on you when you try to rob the bank. That last bill trap that when you pull that final 20 out of the drawer, it sets off the silent alarm. I mean, I guess they have that. I mean, I never really worked as a bank teller, so I don't know. And the bank I worked for didn't have tellers, and we couldn't possibly be robbed. But, when it comes to protecting the entire infrastructure of the organization and all their data and all their customers' data and so forth, you get this, well, we bought that appliance that filters web traffic with next-gen AI, and we ought to be good to cut the security budget and personnel, right? I mean, how many organizations still have a CISO reporting to the CIO? A lot. And it drives me crazy. I mean, the biggest threat in the organization, the IT staff. So at a bank, they wouldn't say, the guards report to the tellers, because guess where that's going to lead? So, let's make the security people report to IT, because even though they're supposed to be policing them, let's just not really let them have any real authority over IT. But, as we start a new year and a new round of next-gen AI-enabled ransomware vectors taking on last year's next-gen AI security appliances, we probably ought to take a little bit of time to reflect and start seeing that the security of our infrastructure is not just a simple fix, and that it's going to be an ongoing and persistent and unending part of the budget, just like financial audit. And like accounting or HR or any of those other kind of service organizations that we have to spend money on because we have to, we need to put security on that same level, maybe even higher. But in the meantime, Bert down in accounting just gave his password to a guy from the Spanish police who's trying to help stop hacking in India. So, and now the news. Well, if you have Windows, and you probably do, and then you have RDP, right? So remote desktop is there. And if you have RDP, you automatically have a problem. I mean, not that I don't use RDP because everybody uses it, right? It's a very useful tool. But this particular vulnerability, 2022-21-893, was reported by CyberArk, and it's another bug found in RDP services on Windows. Now, this particular bug that they found dates all the way back to Server 2012 R2. So that's a while, and it's still there in the current versions. CyberArk said that they could confirm that the majority of Windows versions in use currently are affected by this bug. And what this thing is it's a named pipe vulnerability, which all of us who are Linux users and so forth have heard these things. And of course, Windows uses named pipe as well. And basically what it means is that you can use name pipes to connect things. So this is how basically, depending on who you talk to, this is essentially forming sockets. And name pipes are another way to allow a server and another server, or a server and a client, to actually talk to each other through a named pipe. So a server can listen for a connection to a named pipe from a client. I mean, very common thing. Now, in this case, a command like create named pipe can be used in an API or just as a part of a script or whatever to create a service of the same name. So you have you've got the same name, right? Uh-oh. And so since the way this works, any user could actually create a pipe server instance that has the name of another pipe server instance. Well, then all of a sudden, you've got data being sent in clear text without any integrity checks. And of course, that basically creates a man-in-the-middle attack. So what they outlined is an attacker connects via RDP, They list all the open pipes. They create another pipe server instance that has the same name as one of the ones already running, and they wait for somebody to connect to it. And because it's FIFO, what happens is, as these connections come in, and there can be lots of them going at the same time, eventually you're going to get one that connects to the instance that you just created, and then basically you're the man in the middle, and you can monitor all of the data that's flowing across that named pipe. So this means all sorts of hijinks can ensue, and it's a pretty interesting article if you're interested in such things, or you're using RDP. Even if you're just using it internally, it's probably worth reading. Now, I've heard this before. And in the age of increasing QR codes, which, believe me, we're in the age of increasing QR codes, it's worth mentioning. I went through my house this morning before I did this story, or after I read this story, and I looked at how many QR codes we have gotten just this week, and I think I found 5 that either came with a product or were some other a menu or something. So in this particular story, the city of Austin, Texas, started issuing warnings that they've been finding fake QR codes stuck to parking meters. So this is nothing new to any of us that have studied social engineering, OSINT, and all this kind of stuff. So, but you pull your car in, you've done the parallel parking thing, and you need to pay to park. And, do you actually have any coins, or does the meter even take coins anymore? I mean, I don't have any coins. So you scan a QR code on the meter, and that lets you go to a website where you can pay for your parking. Restaurants do it, hotels do it, everybody's doing this kind of stuff now. So you need to do this, scan this QR code, you're good to go. I figured it was only a matter of time before people started making fake ones and sticking them over the real ones. I mean, basically you scan the code, it takes you to a fake website where you pay for parking, you give up your OSINT and your credit card information and so forth, and you pay. And guess what? Then you still get a parking ticket on top of losing your data and paying some money already. So you may want to, the reason I put the story up was you may want to put on an advisory for your people about this sort of thing, because I see people doing it all the time. I was in a restaurant not too long ago. There was people everywhere scanning the QR code that was stuck on a little tag on the table that said, hey, order here. I'm like, okay. I mean, I saw this at the airport. I'm going to see it at the airport when I go there a little bit later. I've seen it on menus. And, and these things are easily accessible to everybody around. I saw one in a restaurant very recently where there was a sticker on top of another sticker, and I actually asked about it. And the server said, oh, yeah, we update the menu, so they just put a new sticker on there. And I was like, how do I know that's legit? So, watch out. In the old tricks category, apparently USB sticks are being mailed and or handed out at events with, you guessed it, malware. The FBI issued a warning that a malware group has been sending USB sticks to specific targets, and it is the group that ran the Colonial Pipeline attack. Basically, what they're doing is the attackers use the United States, the UPS, United Parcel Service, and the U.S. Postal Service to send these out to businesses in the transportation, insurance, and defense industries. And I'm sure they're doing other ones as well, but this study was on this. And they all these things were set up to look like they were either gifts from Amazon, because you can order USB keys with just about anything on them. They also sent them out looking like COVID alerts, and they were sent from. And again, how hard is it to get an envelope printed from the U.S. Department of Health? And of course, I'm sure they can adapt this constantly. The USB stick, once it's plugged in, launches a bad USB attack, and the malware auto registers as a keyboard, which is very clever. But by posing as a keyboard, of course, the malware can then actually issue commands that look like they were typed in. So they're running, essentially as root. And that allows them to install additional malware or other droppers on the system. Definitely worth a mention to your people. And we've probably mentioned this before, but this Taco Truck Tuesday, which is what I call these kind of attacks, because that was some of the original ones where they were, they had USB sticks as free taco, and they leave them in the parking lots and whatever, and people pick them up and take them inside. If an employee sticks in a USB key, well, I would say all bets are off and have a nice weekend, because you're going to have some fun now. Apple pushed an iOS update to deal with the door lock problem. Door lock, if you're not familiar with it, is a denial of service that basically affects iPhones and iPads running HomeKit on anything on iOS 14.7 and later, which is just about everybody these days. HomeKit, if you aren't familiar with it, is an Apple product that allows for the control of home appliances and other IoT stuff in your home. It could be in a business too, I'm sure. But this problem's been known for a while. It was released. Apple was advised of it. But until this latest update, Apple had just neglected to fix this vulnerability, which involved basically using really large strings, like over 500,000 characters, for the name of a HomeKit device. So you create something and you give it a fake name that's got a lot of characters in it. And basically once this happens and the device is installed with this name, your device, your iPhone or whatever, becomes more and more unresponsive until it crashes. And when that happens, it then basically requires a factory reset. It didn't say, there was some details about, I haven't read it in very deep dive, but it sounds almost like one of those memory leak type problems. But anyway, there was a lot of criticism of Apple about this because they had not fixed it. The updates were pushed out on Wednesday, so you be sure you've updated the latest patch set on your iPhone and iPads, especially if you're using HomeKit. It does affect pretty much everything going back to iPhone 6 and all the iPads that are pretty much still in service. Microsoft, on the flip side of all this, Microsoft pulled their January server cumulative updates since apparently they contained some critical flaws. These flaws were causing domain controllers to reboot, Hyper-V to crash, and REFS volume systems to become unavailable. All these updates were part of the Patch Tuesday collection, which went out this week. But Bleeping Computer then recommended that admins not install the new Windows Server updates at this time, and they have actually been pulled from automatic update. Now, I don't know if they rolled that back. I did not have a chance to look at mine and see if they rolled back those pre-installed things, but if they did install, there's a bunch of vulnerabilities in them. The updates are still available for manual install if you really, really need them. The collection had updates for 97 security vulnerabilities, some of which were critical, so there is that. But, if the juice is more poisonous than the squeeze, then, something like that. But I hate to tell people not to patch, but since we're always telling you to patch, but here's a real quandary for you. Gootloader gang is hijacking WordPress sites and they're being used to try and lure in professionals in accounting and legal. Basically what this attack does is they offer to download sample contract templates, so something a lot of accounting and audit people and legal people are always looking for, and all of course these templates then contain malicious content. Gootloader, of course, is a group that was a main user of Revil ransomware, may have developed it. It's not clear, but they're now apparently getting more specific in their targets. eCentire said that they had observed Gootloader gang going after 3 law firms and 1 accounting firm, specifically observed this. eCentire then identified more than 100,000 pages which had malicious business agreement links set up by Gootloader, and one of the sites had more than 150 pages of content. So they really put an effort into this. Some of the searches that were coming up were people looking for post-nuptial agreements, model IP agreements, Olympus plea agreement were all being used to trick employees into, I don't know what some of those agreements are, but going into the malicious site. The link, instead of downloading the sample, basically downloads Gootloader, which then typically leads to you getting ransomware or some other dropper type thing, unless you have limited the ability of these downloads to run. So, again, this is one of those things you may want to advise your people on and give them some guidance about, downloading sample templates and things, and how do you ensure that these things are legit, and what do you do when they're not. And finally, Take-Two Interactive, famous for Grand Theft Auto, everybody loves that, bought Zynga. I saw this and I was like, boy, that's a sort of a diametrically opposite thing. If you're not familiar with Zynga, they're a game company. They make some of their famous games were Word with Friends, which is a very famous one. People were really addicted to this a few years ago, and Farmville. They paid $12.7 billion for this. And I was like, what? $12.7 billion? I mean, it's like they're buying a game where you tend to crops, which I don't really understand. I mean, I'm not criticizing you if you enjoy it, but I looked at a game like that and I was like, this seems like work to me. But apparently, Zynga rakes in about $500 million in annual sales. So maybe it's going to lead to some kind of freestyle harvesting game where you can, abuse the crops or something, Grand Theft Auto style. I mean, who knows? Words with Hookers, maybe Farmville Opium Warlord Edition. That's hard to say. Farmville Opium Warlord Edition. That's hard to say. Anyway, sounds like fun is on the way. And that's the first wrap-up of the year for 2022. This is the week of 9 January. I'm Doug White, and we'll see you next week on the Security Weekly News.